Hi everyone, welcome. My name is Tunde. I'm a senior engineer at VMware, and in this video, we're going to be looking at a Kubernetes sigs project called Kind. We're just going to quickly look at what Kind does, why Kind exists, and some of the quick and neat things that you could use Kind for. So, like I said, Kind simply stands for Kubernetes in Docker. It's a local Kubernetes cluster for testing Kubernetes. At least that was what it was originally intended for. But Kind could be used for your local development or for CI. Um, and one of the sweet things about Kind is it's a it's not just a single node cluster like Minikube. It contains multiple control planes, and you're able to specify multiple worker nodes. The fascinating thing is that these control plane nodes and Docker nodes all run inside of Docker. So each Docker container is represents or it's equivalent to what you would know as a node. So, for instance, if you deployed three control planes, it would be represented as three Docker containers as your control plane. And we're going to look at what this looks like. But as you can see from this example here, this is how easy it is to install Kind. Just simply run a Kind create cluster, installs a Kubernetes cluster for you with the specified version or default version that comes with the version of Kind that you're installing. So for instance, in this example, it installs Kubernetes version 1.16.3, but users are also able to specify the version of Kind that they would like to install, or version of Kubernetes they would like to install. Um, One of the really neat things I like about Kind is that you have all these really cool emojis next to each of the stages in the setup. So like while you're installing CNI, it looks like you're plugging something in, and then storage class you have what looks like a floppy disk in this case, and so it's pretty neat, right? I find it very useful for troubleshooting and for quick development type stuff, or maybe I would like to simulate a failure, or maybe just threading new paths inside of Kubernetes. It's really neat for things like that. So what does it take to install Kind? So Kind today is compatible on Mac, Linux, and I believe you can now install Kind on Windows. With Homebrew installed inside of your Mac, you can simply do a brew install Kind, and you have Kind up and running inside of your Kubernetes cluster, inside of your workstation. And likewise on your Mac, another way to install on Mac and Linux is by just downloading the binary from from the URL specified here, and moving it to a specific directory within your workstation. So some of the command line commands that you're able to run in Kind is Kind create cluster, Kind delete cluster to delete the cluster. Um, you're also able to do something like Kind build node image. This allows you to build a node image specifically for your for either the worker component, or for either the worker node or the control plane node. So like I mentioned earlier, you're able to specify the Kubernetes version that you're trying to install uh, inside of the Kubernetes cluster. So in this case, they're specifying the build image. That's why it says node latest. But I'm going to show you quickly what this looks like in my environment. See, so Kind supports multi-node clusters. It supports building of Kubernetes releases from source, and it's one of the really neat things I like about Kind. It supports Linux, Mac, and Windows, and also it's a CNCF certified conformant Kubernetes installer. Okay, so what does kind look like inside of my environment? So let's see. I do have kind installed, and I should be able to run kind version. I believe I'm running the latest release. Um, I have kind version 0.7.0, and I'm simply able to do a kind create cluster, and this installs a single node control plane running Kubernetes version 1.17.0. So I could also switch this version here to be something like 1.15.4, 1.15.3, depending on what versions exist inside of the Docker repository with kindness slash node. So while this is going on, let's quickly look at some of the images that exist in that Docker Hub repository. So let's look at that real quick. So let's just search for kindest slash node. Okay, and look at tags. So yeah, so here we have 1.11, we have 1.12, we have 1.16.4 available. I believe there is 1.17, 17.0 also. Yep. And so here you can search for any Kubernetes versions that you're looking for, or just build from source. It's worth noting that some versions that you're trying to build might not be compatible with the kind version that you're running also. So look into the documentation before doing anything like that. So let's go back to our environment. So quickly, yeah, kind is already running. That's how quick kind is to install. Um, so if I run kubectl get node, you can see I have kind status is ready, and then the version that is running is also version 1.17.0. So what does this look like on our node? So simply what this is so I do have a different cluster running prior to now, but you would see my kind control plane, which is what we're running right now, using the image kindness slash node version 1.17.0, and also it's running as a container, which is what I was specifically trying to point out. So that's how easy it is to install kind. By default, it ships with default CNI known as kindnet. So we do kind kubectl get pods -a. You can see that it has kindnet running as the default CNI. So it's pretty cool. This is what it looks like to create a cluster, and deleting a cluster is as easy as first during running a kind get cluster, we can find out what clusters we have available. We have the DB cluster and the kind cluster. The kind cluster is the one I just bootstrapped, and what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to delete the kind cluster we just created. Kind delete cluster dash main kind. So sweet, the cluster is already deleted. So now if I run docker ps, you would notice that kind control plane no longer exists. And that's how easy it is to create and delete clusters. Now let's look at what it looks like to customize a cluster. That is, maybe you want to install like an HA Kubernetes cluster, or maybe a cluster with just 2 control planes and multiple workers, or just 1 worker, or just 2 control planes. So in this directory, I have a couple of YAML files, but specifically we'll be looking at the HA cluster for v4. V4 in this case here is a way for me to identify the kind. So let's see, HA cluster dash v4. Okay, so in this cluster, yeah, one interesting thing is in the schema for this, we have the kind as cluster, we have the API version here as v1 alpha 4. Prior to v1 alpha 4, there was a v1 alpha 3 that supported different fields in this struct for node, and even in the cluster struct itself, um, in the cluster data structure itself. Here we have multiple rows. We have a control plane row. Each control plane row represents what's going to turn out to be a control plane node. So two control plane rows here means you have two control plane nodes, and three control plane rows here represents an instance of three instances of control planes. And here we have a role for one worker. So if we wanted more workers, all we have to do is just pass in more roles for worker. And each node each node row has its own specific configuration. Here I'm just mapping the port, the container port 80 to the host port 80, so we're able to deploy a pod inside of a test pod inside of the cluster, and then interact with that cluster without executing into the container itself. So this is what it looks like. You can simply have just one single control plane here or one single worker. And there is also examples on the kind page, which we'll take a look at shortly. But here's how to use this. To use this configuration, we simply say kind create cluster, and we can specify a name, and let's say we call this HA, and then we specify the configuration that we want to use for this cluster. And this is where we pass in the configuration that we just looked at not too long ago, and that is kind create cluster dash dash name HA and dash dash config HA cluster v4.yaml. This is all you simply need to do to create an HA cluster. But before I do that, I want to show you the some of the commands that you could also pass in. You could specify the path you want to your kubeconfig to be in. You can specify a retain period, a wait period. You can also increase the verbosity, right? And so you can see what's going on while the installation is happening. So I'm just going to stick to just kind create cluster, and we look at how fast we can simply create this. Note I already have a cluster running, so maybe what I would want to do is delete my whole cluster just to save. So let's go back. So it's going to take a little bit, because this time around we do have to create, like, it configures like an external load balancer for the control planes, and does a lot more than just what it requires for like a single control plane node. But while we're looking at that, like I mentioned earlier, there is a page that you can get to via a documentation page for kind. So you can come to the GitHub repository for kind and just click on this link here, or just click on the documentation here, and it should take you to this quick start page that shows you quick installation and usage guide, and also community for kind, where to reach folks in the Kubernetes Slack channel, and also the core maintainers and Bear and at Munaz. And yeah, you see, it's a really friendly group of people, and always happy to listen to your questions and help. And then it also contains known issues page, where you can see some of the challenges or some of the problems that are known with kind, and then you can also see the design principles in here. So let's go back to your environment and see what's going. So now it looks like we're joining more control plane nodes, and this should wrap up very soon. So kind is pretty cool. Like one of my I remember working with Minikube like earlier, and it was just difficult to work with Minikube, being a single control plane. Very hard to simulate certain production or production failures inside of the environment. Um, like for instance, in my subsequent videos, I would be looking at how to recover from a complete failure of an etcd cluster, and a single a single etcd cluster would not be able to do justice to the demo I would like to do. And another thing is how quickly I can spin up this environment and the infrastructure that is required for it. So now we have kind an HA kind cluster running. So if I run kubectl get nodes, you can see now we have an HA Kubernetes cluster, and we have the etcd pod running a static pod as part of the Kubernetes cluster, static pods, and then we have the kindnet default CNI also running. We're also able to specify our own CNIs. There's more information on how to do that in the kind documentation. But here's how to here's kind. Here's how easy it is to use. Take it for a spin. Thank you.